Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hesed Sabbath Fellowship. We are not meeting at our building right now. We're still locked out. We're discussing some other options where we may come up with a video option. I'm anti just filming stuff and putting it out on Facebook and things like that, and I don't think we fit into that anyway. But we're going to continue on with this series, which is the eschatology, the philosophy of eschatology, what you need to know, what your reality is, what your existence is, where Beth Hesed will remain as an entity. It's just how we will remain, I don't know, because it's kind of difficult when you don't have a building. We try to stay away from disparate thinking, which is illogical thinking. The Bible should be real, and it should matter to you to read it. And we're going to go through what words mean today, especially pronouns. We're going to spend some time on some of the pronouns because of wrath and you're coming into this time frame where you sense that there's some wrath coming, maybe from your politicians, maybe your governor or your. There was a Canadian family here where 6 people gathered in a house, and the government came and jailed them for having 6 people in a house. Well, that's wrath. Okay. Now, that's not God's wrath. That might be government wrath or Satan's wrath, but it's not God's wrath. So we need to work on our pronouns today and spend a few minutes and we need to discuss some of the verses that are thrown back in my face all the time. We're not appointed to wrath. We're not appointed to wrath. The wrath of God. Are you storing up wrath for yourself in the day of God's wrath? Okay, the wrath of God, the wrath of God. It's everywhere in the Bible, but why is it then that certain people believe that there is no wrath? They're just going to be wished out via the rapture, and there's no wrath. There's going to be wrath. So I have to prepare you for the wrath aspect and what wrath means and what the pronouns mean and things like that. So I believe wrath is eternal damnation for somebody, and I believe, or for an individual or a group, but I don't believe that wrath is just stubbing your toe or being in a car accident. That's not wrath. And so, the guy way off to the right-hand side here, delivered from the wrath to come. Well, which wrath? There's a few different words and a few different applications. So let's go with the big verses that they always cite, okay? But let us, who are of the day, that means that we work in the light of day. We don't do our deeds at night and dark, and secrecy, the bad deeds. Be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, for an helmet, and the hope of salvation. For God hath not appointed us, that's plural collective, okay, in the Greek. And so that's to wrath, which is orge in the Greek. And you'll see me use that a lot. Orge is a standard word for wrath. Anger, divine punishment, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Okay, so we're going to look at the other verse in just a second, but let's look at this one more time just so you can see it. For God hath not appointed us, that is a plural, that's all of us, or all of the believers, so to speak, to wrath. Okay? And that is a divine punishment that's more collective punishment. Okay? Now, there might be some individual wrath. God starts with his own house first. So, if you're, okay, there's a weird story maybe 3, 4 years ago where Focus on the Family, no, it was the other one, Family Life and Focus, I think it is, down in Arkansas. They had this wonderful leader, and the tornado that came through Arkansas hit his house first and destroyed his house and his family and him, and I think everybody was killed. And it's like, well, he was a good guy. He was part of a nice family-based ministry out of Arkansas, and I couldn't figure that one out. The tornado went for him first. Is that God's wrath? No, that it is wrath in terms of the tornado's wrath. But so anyway, you need to be aware that that is not a group of believers. We are individually going to have some wrath issues with the life that's coming up, and also that we are saved individually, but yet there are corporate problems if we all sin. Okay, and then we'll just read it one more time in the complete Jewish Bible version. The other one was KJV, which is a good version. I mean, I'm not anti-KJV, it's just that I like the thought behind the thought, and the complete Jewish Bible does a better job of giving me the thought behind the thought. And it's not an exact translation. But since we belong to the day, let us stay sober, putting on trust and love as a breastplate, and hope as being delivered as a helmet. For God has not intended that we should experience his fury, but that we should gain deliverance through individual deliverance through our Lord Jesus, Yeshua the Messiah, who died on our behalf, so that whatever or whether we are alive or dead, we may live along with him. Okay, so now you're starting to see it in a different version where we really aren't intended to experience his fury, but yet there is going to be some fury coming up. So let's look at pouring out the wrath. So there are sections of Jeremiah and Psalms where it's time to pour out your wrath, God. So let's talk about it. Adonai, I know the way of humans is not in their control. Humans are not able to direct their steps as they walk. Adonai, correct me, but in moderation and not in your anger. Okay, so this is off. This is more like nose anger. Off is residing in the nose. It's snorting almost. Okay, and in the Greek that would be it's like thermos, but thymus. Okay, and you'll see those words pop up a lot, off and thymus in this case, okay? Or you'll reduce me to nothing. Pour out your anger, chema in the Hebrew, thymus again in the Greek, on the nations that do not acknowledge you, also on the families that do not call on your name, for they have consumed Yaakov, consumed him and finished him off, and laid waste to his home. Okay, so that's Jeremiah 10. That's the chapter that talks about Christmas too. So I was reading that the other day just to remember that you aren't supposed to put up a Christmas tree, and there it is right after that. So it's very interesting how he goes from don't be like the nations and put up Christmas trees, and then he goes into, or I'll pour out my wrath on you. Because people worship the Christmas trees. Look up the lyrics to "O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum." You know, it is a worship song. It is worshiping the tree. Then the next verse that shows this anger is, how long, Adonai, will you be angry? Anaf, which is like af, or gizo in the Greek. So it is like orge. Forever. How long will you jealously burn like fire? Pour out your wrath, chema again, and orge, okay, on the nations that don't know you. So literally, I believe this is David saying, pour out your wrath on the nations that don't know you, on the kingdoms that don't call out your name, for they have devoured Yaakov. Okay, same case, consumed, devoured Yaakov. And so when you come against the Jews, because you don't believe in God, you're going to get the anger. You're going to get the off, the orge, whatever it happens to be. And so we're going to study some of these differences between those. Now, I'm arguing today that this is what's going to happen. This is actually an older article, but I wanted to cite this. Where's this group's grace in Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali? These people are being burned alive, murdered, 200 here, 200 there. You know, there is a war going on in these various countries between different sects, and the Christians are being raped and slaughtered, targeted and killed. Here's 58 dead, dozens were injured. I mean, and no one's protecting them at all. So Gatestone is talking about this, and you can tell exactly who is doing the raping and who's doing the slaughtering and who's the target of this. It's the Christians. And I have a friend that's a missionary from Burkina Faso, and she's fortunate that she was in the southern side, but when you get up into the mountains, it gets pretty ugly up there. Nigeria, the same way. You get on the coast side, it's pretty safe, but you get up into the mountains, and oh boy, or up into the foothills. So it's horrible right now. Mali, 27 people killed, some burnt alive, and they're holding on to their faith. Was this the wrath of God? No, this is the wrath of mankind, or Satan, potentially. And is this the wrath of God, or is this the wrath of Gavin Newsom? John MacArthur, the famous pastor, wants his freedom. He's the guy that stands by strange fire. So he believes everything that I believe in is strange fire, which is that God manifests today in amazing ways through tongues, through other gifts and other things like that. He doesn't believe in any of those things. So he's saying that he's going to disobey Gavin Newsom, and there's his former lovely wife there, Kimberly Guilfoyle, the Fox person. You know, I don't believe that this is wrath from God. This is just a little bit of persecution, but it's not very much, really. I mean, you could still meet in other ways. You could still do video church. You can still do small group meetings. You can still do lots of things. And so here's an article from the Babylon Bee on the right-hand side saying, "Freedom," cries kilt wearing John MacArthur defying government order to close church. Well, this isn't persecution, really. I mean, it's barely there. They're still functioning as a church. My church is, I mean, whatever we are, we're a fellowship, is still functioning. I mean, we're still in existence. Um, John MacArthur is going to defy the governor, and he's okay. So here it is. As Governor Gavin Newsom ordered churches to remain closed until death, suffering, disease, and sorrow have passed away, and there's no longer any risk associated with going outside, John MacArthur announced his church would be defying the order. Okay, this is not the mark of 666. And the virus that we're dealing with right now, the antidote for it, the vaccine, is not the 666 because it's not tied into a database yet. It is teaching you about the coming 666 mark, but it's not there yet. We're getting closer. I'll do another video on that later on. So the main thing is this is a little bit of persecution, barely so. He's not going to jail. His people aren't going to jail. The Canadians are going to jail right now. That is interesting to see what happens up there. They're like our test pilot case up there. This is persecution, people. There's China. They are being persecuted. So pray for the Chinese Christians. Pray for the Nigerian Christians. Pray for the person that was burned inside that bowl down below, because that is what people are doing. They're burning people. This is Fox Books of Martyrs. It's an older book, but it's very accurate on the martyrs over the thousands of years. So he has different types of grace and he has different types of wrath, but it's not God's wrath that these people die. Think of all the martyrs in the Bible. It occurred frequently. So we need to talk about it because we're studying the philosophy of the end times. What's coming up here? Are we appointed to wrath or not, and whose wrath and why, and things like that. So we try not to twist the Bible. We try to accurately interpret prophecy, and we look at the news properly because we are studying the philosophy of the end of days. So pronouns. In the Hebrew, everything is object pronouns are in the left-hand side. So if you're reading something like itam in the middle there with them, or y'all here near the bottom. So go way down to the right-hand or the left-hand side, sorry, to the bottom, near the bottom, and you'll see itkem, okay? And that's y'all, okay? Now that's different than with him, with her, with you, male or female, with me, with them, male or female. And so you can see the differences with each one of the suffixes and then with us on the bottom. Okay, so you need to be aware of that as you're reading through the Hebrew so that you're aware that sometimes it's appearing to be wrath against an individual. Sometimes it's a wrath against a group, and why it would be called that way. And it's generally wrath against the nations too, so keep that in mind. And then this is funny because this kind of shows what I'm talking about. This is from the Texas Bible. Do you not know that you are a temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, and that is what you are. Okay, so that's interesting. So here's how they handled it in Texas. Do y'all know that y'all are a temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells in y'all? If a man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, and that is what y'all are. Okay? So that's a very accurate description of what the Bible is saying there. It's y'all. It's the whole group of you. It's not, so keep in mind the yous that we're used to in the Hebrew are individual, male, female, and then collectively, with especially the itkem down below there on the left-hand side. And then you can see a little bit more of this with the differences in the Hebrew, singular versus plural. It's very different. And the problem is Christianity really doesn't teach it that way. It's more individualistic. And Judaism is, they would understand that sometimes it's individuals and sometimes it's the collective, especially Yom Kippur. It's kind of both. And you need to be aware of that. And we're going to go through now the second aspect of the Shema prayer, which is Deuteronomy 11. So it starts with Deuteronomy 6, then goes to 11. And it shall come to pass, if you shall hearken diligently unto my commandments that I command you, y'all, this day to love the Lord y'all God, and to serve him with all your all heart and with all your y'all soul. I will give rain for y'all land in the season, the former rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in thy corn, thy wine, and thy oil, and I will give grass in thy fields for thy cattle, and thou shalt eat and be satisfied. Take heed to yourselves, lest your heart be deceived, and you turn aside to serve other gods and worship them. And this is an internal anger, the off anger, or gizo, of the Lord will be collectively kindled, kara, and it's thumao, which is, it's thumos, okay, against y'all, and he will shut up the heaven, and there shall be no rain, and the ground shall not yield her fruit, and perish quickly off the good land which the Lord giveth y'all. Okay, now I wanted you to see that, because in the beginning, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Va'ahavta, when we go through that, it's all with the ka ending in most cases, which is going to be individually. It's a relationship with you and God on that level. This isn't a relationship corporate, all of us, y'all's with God. And he says, and if you won't do that, fine. I'll send this internal anger against you, and it'll be kindled, and he'll shut up the heavens, and there will be no rain and no yield, and that's kind of what we're dealing with the third seal too. So keep that in mind. That's going to occur, and it's going to occur even more. So now we're going to go through some of the words. This is, so it's thermos, but it's thermos, okay? And it should be off in the Bible in most cases, not always. And I'm going to show you how it isn't exactly linear from one to the other, from the Greek on the left-hand side to the Hebrew on the other side. But it's an internal passion, anger, heat, boiling up, soon subsiding again, a glow, ardor, wine of passion, and flaming wine, breathing hard. It sounds like thermos, I know, thumos, for hot coffee. So it's kind of like that, so keep that in mind. And then that is it in the Greek down below, the thumos and thumu. It's passive, so keep that in mind. It's a passive word, and cause one to become incensed, provoke anger. So it's to be wroth. And there's the word chara there down below. This is the Thayer's left in there from Matthew 2:16. So I would argue that this is a nostril flare, because in this case, in many cases, it's the nostril. Off is the nostril, nose, the face, internal anger. And so we'll use it in context here. So Exodus 4:14, and the off of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know. And so this is where Moses says, I don't know how to talk, so have Aaron speak for me. And God was angry. That was an internal angry. Okay, anger. Then Exodus 15:8, and with the blast of thy nostrils, do you see it? Off, the waters were gathered together, and the floods stood upright and then heap, and the depths were congealed, and the heart of the sea drowning Pharaoh and his army. So there he comes individually against Moses and corporately against Pharaoh. So it depends upon how the pronouns were set up in the Hebrew. Now we move on to the word that is the key word. I wanted to show you one other word first, which is thumos. And now orge. It's collective wrath. It's different. This is everybody gets it. So going back to those other verses like 1 Thessalonians 5:9, you will see it's a collective wrath. Okay, so anger, natural disposition, temper, character, movement, or agitation of the soul, impulse, desire, any violent emotion, wrath, indignation, anger, exhibited in punishment, hence used for punishment itself of punishments inflicted by magistrates. Okay, so it could be magistrates too. So if you're not appointed to wrath, well, magistrates have the right to appoint wrath to you. So this is a collective wrath. For God hath not appointed us to collective wrath, but to obtain the individual salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, fine. For the collective wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Okay, Revelation 16:19, a great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and the great Babylon came in remembrance before God. This is 16, where all the bowls are being poured out, to give up her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his collective wrath. Do you see how it works there? Okay, so this is collective. And then out of the mouth of the goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, He shall rule them with the rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and collective wrath of Almighty God. So it's not an individual thing. This is a national, the nations, the ethnos in the Greek. And so there are 70 nations, and they're all coming against Israel at some point in time, and God's going to be angry. And so this is that orge in the Greek, and it depends upon how, well, I'm not looking at any Hebrew sections here, but it is a different variation of it. So just so you can see orge listed and how it seems to always work collectively in these particular applications here. Okay, continuing on, here's another Hebrew word that's kind of like orge, but no, it actually pops up more as off, but I want to show you both anyway, just so you can see different words applied differently in the Hebrew. So chara with a chet, to be incensed, to be hot, furious, burn, become angry, be kindled, burn, kindle, angry with, burn, kindle, heat oneself, and vexation. It is also a chet, an 8 plus evil. So it's chara, ra would be evil. So it's that het letter rather, and then a ra after that, which is evil. So it's an interesting combination of letters to make this work. So for the Lord God, thy God is a jealous God among you, lest the anger, the off of the Lord thy God be kindled against thee and destroy thee from off the face of this earth. So I want to see the progression. Now we're going to have a progression of 3 of these later on, but right now this is generally the 2 progressions. So you can see that it starts with the internal anger of the nose, and then it's kindled to the chara when it becomes more collective, we'll call it possibly. It depends. Sometimes it's kindled against an individual, sometimes it's against everybody. Okay, so Deuteronomy 7:4. And by the way, the Deuteronomy 6:15 is part of the first part of the Shema, so that would be against individual you, okay, not y'all. 7:4, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods, so that the anger, the off of the Lord, be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. Sakara, okay. Deuteronomy 11:17, and then the Lord's wrath off again, internal, be kindled against you, and he will shut up the heaven. And okay, so you've read this already from 11:17. You know that that is 6:15 up above was against individuals. This is corporate. This is a collective. Okay, so it depends upon the pronouns. Deuteronomy 29:27, and the anger of the off of the Lord was kindled against this land and brought upon it all the curses that are written in this book. Okay, I can't remember if that's individual or 29 is probably collective. Yes. And then my anger off shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, are not these evils come upon us because our God is not among us? So that's late in Deuteronomy as the plagues come during the end times. We're not up to 32, which is definitely the end times. Here's another version. So this is so there was orge 3709, and then orgizo 3710. This is passive again. Passive provoked anger. You can see in the Hebrew that it could be kara again, could be off, could be kara again, could be ketzaf. And we'll talk about ketzaf later on. So this is just another version of it. And I wanted to read these verses again just so you could see it in use. Be ye angry, and so don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. So it's got both in there. Interesting. Okay. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come. Do you see the progression? How so angry is probably that off word in each case here, the 2 angries. And then that, so you can see probably the ketzaf or something else is more the wrath that comes. So, but it's very standard between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's the same language. This is the same God. People deal with it. It's the same God. And at the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and thou should judge them, and should give a reward unto thy servants, the prophets, and unto the saints, and them that fear thy name, small or great, and should destroy them which destroy the earth. Okay, continuing on, the dragon was wroth with the woman. Now, this is the dragon, Satan, from Revelation 12. Is this an internal wrath? No, this is probably going out, and this is more overt, not as well. No, at first it's more passive because he isn't able to attack her in that way yet, but he will be able to later on. So continuing on, here's some wrath orge words that you need to see just in context. So let's go through them. Wow, this is going to be a long video. And said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from from him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and thou should give them reward unto thy servants, the prophets. Oh yeah, we already read this. Then 14:10, the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. So you can see the different words at play. Usually they come as two together or three in terms of wrath and indignation. It always starts with the nose, the internal, and then it gets to the external as things progress along. And then he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone. Revelation 16. We already kind of read this a little bit. Babylon comes in remembrance, and then the fierceness of his wrath. And then 19:5. We already read this too. So just so you can see the combination of wrath, and anger and wrath, and the internal and then the external. And then a couple more. This is Themos. And therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell on them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil has come down unto y'all, having great wrath, because he knows that you have but a short time. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made the nations drink of the wine of her wrath, of the wrath of her fornication. Here's another one with wrath and indignation. So you can see probably more like the off of God, which is poured out without mixture in the cup of his indignation. And that is the different version of wrath. So you can see the two wraths at play constantly. Are you seeing the consistent thing? Wrath, wrath, wrath. Now, down below here, it's just single wraths, but it's generally part of the overall plan, more of the wraths, more singular. No, here it is. Here it is. So let's do Revelation 16:19 again. The fierceness, internal passion, thumu, of his wrath, collective battle, fury, orge. Okay, so you can see Revelation 19:15 again, fierceness and wrath, fierceness and wrath. Here's the Ketzaf word, which is interesting. And so that's just another one. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the Ketzaf is 7107 in the Hebrew, but it could be any one of these 8, 9 different words in the Greek. And then here's orge down below and going back to the Hebrew. So this is why it's not exact for me. I can't say that it's always one or the other. I could say it's internal or external, and that's about it, because I can't link back. I was hoping to be able to do that for you so that I could literally say it's this or this. That's the way it is, but it's not. It's an imprecise science going back and forth between the Hebrew at first on the top here to the Greek, and then from the Greek word orge to the Hebrew. But I wanted to show you that off is part of it. And then, yeah, then a few other words. And we're not going to go through all of those because that's a lot of Hebrew. Okay, so now we're going to go through a section that's very, very interesting in Jeremiah. One of my buddies, my Greek buddy, told me, Joel, you need to cite this. So in this case, this is Hebrew, so we're going to be reading from right to left. And so the king of Babylon by the sword and by famine and by pestilence. So it's very interesting. 3 of the big 4 of Revelation 8 are listed right there. The sword, Cherev, and then Ra'av, which is famine, and then the bear, which is like word of pestilence, which is interesting. Behold, I will gather them out of all the countries where I have driven them in my anger. So there's the ba'af, so in afi, okay? And then in my fury, okay? And that is chema, oh, chema, yeah. I don't think we talked about that much, but that's another Hebrew word for it. And in my wrath, beketzaf. There it is. So now you've got the 3 different things going on. So it starts out with internal, then its fury is more external, and then Ketzaf is more really external. And we'll bring them back to place Hamakom. That's the Temple Mount. This I will cause them to dwell safely, and they shall be my people. Li ami la'am. Yeah, okay, cool. So my people, yep. And I will be their God, and they will give them heart one and away and one, and they will fear me. Okay, so this is the end times, and you can see the progression from the internal to the external for anger. So here's a couple more verses that I want you to be aware of as we wind down here. I said, surely now you will fear me, you will receive correction, so that her place will not be cut off by all the punishments I brought on her. But no, they only grew all the more eager to be corrupt in all that they do. Therefore, wait for me, says Adonai, for the day when I rise. Yom Kumi, so that's kum is kuma Adonai v'yavutzu ayaveka. It's kuma, rise, Lord, to witness against you when I decide to assemble nations, goyim, and gather kingdoms together and pour, that's shafak in this case, he's pouring it out on them, my indignation and all my furious anger, kol karon af. There it is. It's the whole thing. It's the all furious anger. And it's the nose anger, the internal. For all the earth will be consumed in the fire of my passion. For then I will change the peoples so that they will have pure lips and call on the name of Adonai, all of them, and serve him with one accord. Wow. That's Zephaniah 3, 7 through 9. Beautiful. A couple more verses here. I wanted you to see what shafak is, just so you can see it in context a couple more times. So I will demand an accounting for the blood of your lives. I will demand it from every animal, from every human being. I will demand from every human being an accounting for the life of his fellow human being. Whoever sheds a human blood by a human being, his own blood will be shed, and God will make beings in his image. So shafak relates to this in terms of how God set it up is if we kill somebody, God has to shed blood as a result of that. And he's saying that he made humans in his image. And so you're shedding the image of God, literally. And so there has to be an accounting for it. There just has to be. And so Yeshua is the accounting for it. But also there will be an accounting in the end of days as God is long suffering. You can see the anger progression here, the internal, moving along down the line here. Then we get to the end and he has to act. He has to get up and act. Eat it as you would a gazelle or a deer, the unclean and the clean alike. You may eat it. You just take care not to eat the blood. For the blood is the life. You are not to eat the life without the meat. Don't eat it, but pour it out. Shafak. There you go. On the ground like water. So you pour the blood out, and that's what God is going to do in the end times. He's going to shafak the blood out like water. Do not eat it so that things will go well with you and with your children after you, so that you do what Adonai sees as right. So that's Deuteronomy 12. So we're getting back to John MacArthur again. And that's how it started out, because John and the other pre-trib rapture people are always saying we're not destined, we're not doomed, to orge, which would be wrath of God. And so he teaches all of these other points. I don't know if he's a 5-point Calvinist. John Piper is. MacArthur probably is a 4.5. And so, but some of these things don't match up, because when you have part of the reason why MacArthur would say that he shouldn't have any wrath against him is because he has this view that the wrath is for sinners, and he's not a sinner. He doesn't sin, in his mind's eye. And so he would believe, based on tulip, which is, let's see if I listed it out here. Tulip would be, total depravity. Irresistible grace is I. Perseverance, tulip. Why do I have this backwards? I'm sorry, it must have been the way I cut and pasted it. So anyway, all of these different points that I disagree with him on all 5 points. Okay, on tulips, on Reformed theology, which would be Calvinism, and or Calvinism is a version of Reformed theology. The main thing is that they would believe that they're predestined to only the good things, not the bad things. And I'm telling you that we're all sinners, and we're all going to get something, whatever level it is, whether it's individual or corporate, it's going to happen. So don't look at it from John MacArthur's viewpoint as bad things start to happen, because it's all of his theology is going to fall apart like a house of cards. Where are we right now? We are in the birth pangs. We're moving along to the tribulation and then the great tribulation. We're getting closer to the end. The 2 witnesses would show up beforehand. The seals resemble the birth pangs, and we're going through the seals. We're in seal 3 right now. We will see seal 4 soon enough. and you'll see horrible, the big four of them, which would be the supernatural deaths, drought, death in general, and biological warfare. Then you move on to seal 5, seal 6, and then you go into the Great Tribulation. The spirit of Amalek is busy and active right now, and so Moses lifted up his arms to fight back in prayer against Amalek, and that was the first example of emunah, which is faith in the Bible. So keep that in mind. Keep your hands up. Keep praying against Amalek. Wear the righteous garments. It's a wedding coming. And that should be the end. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening to me. And please call 612-315-6778 before you show up at our get-togethers. We might start something newer that would be a little bit of video based, but we'll see how that goes. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.